what I think it's sort of this little secret that people will talk about, I want to find a mate or whatever, but it's a little more vulnerable to say, I need friends, right? That's supposed to come easy. And so I think first thing is just, it doesn't necessarily come easy the older we get. I know, people would say that all the time. I was like, whatever, I don't believe that the older we get, the harder it is, but you're not in those situations, right? You're no longer at college, or maybe you don't work in an environment where everybody goes out for happy hour after work. So I think the first piece of vulnerability is literally realizing that you're going to have to probably work at it and put yourself out there. And that doesn't make you weird, and that doesn't mean something's wrong.
Hey there, lady. My name is Molly Conley, and I'm devoted to helping women reinvent their love lives, whether that's after divorce, dating on and off the apps, or in their committed relationship. Why? Because I've been there. I'm a former college athlete who filed for divorce 3 years into marriage, swam in the online dating pool into my late 30s, and now I am married to the man of my spreadsheet dreams, who I met 4 months before the world shut down. As a dating and relationship coach, I help my clients shift the focus from being obsessed with finding Mr. Right to shifting to herself as Miss Right Now. We build a foundation filled with clarity, connection, and confidence, knowing she is worth waiting for. Each week on the podcast, I'll bring you love life insights and savvy guests, where you will receive the courage to release programmed limiting beliefs. Discover patterns and behaviors restricting you from finding and attracting quality men, and ways to choose yourself first so you can build a foundation for a healthy relationship with yourself and a partner. Why, hello there, lady. Welcome back to the Reinventing the Arena podcast. Today, I have a guest who describes herself as a recovering risk-avoidant scaredy cat. Through her own journey of personal development, Amanda McPherson became a trained therapist, leadership coach, and a motivational speaker. Her passion is helping individuals reach their highest potential in both their personal and professional lives. Welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thank you, Molly. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Oh, it is going to be a great episode. Like I mentioned to you before we started recording, there's a lot of ladies that have been reaching out to me, telling me it's something they're going through. And what I love, in order to get us started, is how your personal journey, as I recently explained, includes those 3 areas that work so well together: therapy, coaching, motivational speaking. Can you share how you got started on that for your personal development journey?
Sure, Molly. Yeah, I think probably like a lot of us in this line of work, I was trying to figure out the ever sort of plaguing question is, how am I going to be happy in my life? What is going to fulfill me? What is my purpose? Those types of questions. And it was in a speech the other day, I mentioned, I think I was thinking about this. I know I was thinking about this stuff, even from my early teenage years, really struggling to think, why do they seem so at peace and so confident and so happy? And I struggled to find that. So it's really my journey of trying to find out the answers to that question. What is going to make me happy? And so I was in a totally different career for well over a decade. That was a fine job. I mean, I made a good living. My dad was proud to tell people what I did. It was sort of a prestigious looking role from the outside, but I always knew what really made me tick and what I was really interested in was what created, how people became who they were, and again, how they could become happier and more fulfilled. So eventually I went back to school while I was working full time. I just say that because I want people to know there are ways to make this happen. If you feel like you're not ready just to leap and take a vow of poverty or whatever to go after your passion, I worked a full-time job, went to school at night, got my master's degree in counseling, then eventually decided coaching was more of the fit for me for a variety of reasons. I like the idea of it being and not that therapy can't be, but it's empowering, it's forward moving. Yeah. And really for me, coaching is what made me from what I call just a really self-aware young woman who could talk about her issues forever to someone who truly did things differently, changed my career, started dating differently, right, Ollie, started, showing up in this world differently. While therapy was great, I think, to maybe get me to where I was open to that or help me understand some things about my past, coaching was so powerful that I'm just really became on fire about it. And I've always been a bit of a weirdo that I love speaking in front of people. You said it in my bio. I am a total scaredy cat in so many ways. I have was so afraid, but for some weird reason, standing in front of a bunch of people and talking and performing wasn't one of them. It's an area where I get a thrill, so and feel a lot of energy. So I do speaking. A lot of it. I just spoke to 700 college age girls the other day, which is to me such a well, women were always trying to figure out so many things about life, right? It's never quite kind of easy in some ways, but what a formative time of life, right? So I have a real soft spot in my heart for women sort of at that stage, really trying to figure out who they are, how they want to show up in this world, what they value. So that may have been a longer answer than you were looking for, but yeah.
No, that's great because like it just shows, especially I love the difference between therapy and coaching. A lot of people kind of get hung up on that. And the easiest way is always to say, oh, well, therapy goes backwards, coaching goes forwards. But, in coaching, we kind of go backwards a little bit. But you're so right. You become so self-aware when you do therapy, but it's not always like, hey, here's your next step. I also went through therapy, not for personal reasons, but not for development for my business. So definitely can say coaching was the one that really helped accelerate that for me.
Yeah, it was the thing that, pardon my French, but really made me think maybe I do have an inner badass in me, whereas that's what coaching did. Whereas therapy was cathartic and wonderful to have someone to talk to. And I value that. There's a time and place for that, but channel that inner badass.
Well, yeah. And like you said, being able to stand up in front of people and speak. When I first started this podcast, I mean, just by myself, I couldn't even handle the idea of hearing my own voice, let alone like asking someone to come on here and talk with me. I was like so scared the first few people I interviewed, and they were people I knew. So after a while, you just practice, you get better at it. But you saying right away, that's something you could easily do. I am very envious, and I can only imagine how many people listening feel the same way.
So. Well, it's so weird. Again, like I said, there's a lot of things you probably do that would cause me some nervousness and anxiety. But yeah, I was a theater nerd growing up and sang, and so it kind of started from a young age.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, and another thing about your story, and it's beautiful, honestly. When I was doing a little bit more research on you, hearing about your story and your personal side, I'm divorced. I was divorced actually before the age of 30, and I tried online dating, and real life dating, but I didn't meet my current husband until about the world shut down. So I was about 37, 38, and we married 2 years later. And what I loved was how you focused on when you were single, becoming more of yourself, and really before you found a husband, which was finding more of a, like almost just cultivating that nurturing friend group. Can you share how you came to that realization was what you needed?
I'll be honest that a lot of my energy for a long time was spent on finding this man, this Prince Charming that was going to rescue me from life, really. And I know it's 2023, and that's not a very empowered Barbie, thing to say, right? But I'm sorry, and I know you probably know this too, Molly. There's still a lot of that. I have young women that still feel like that is the thing, this black cloud right over them. So I get that. I want to say that I get that. And from a very young age, it was boyfriends and boy craziness. And I think it kind of came in hand in hand with my career change, to be completely honest. So that was in my early 30s, where I was like, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, right? And keep my continued looking at this man to answer all my life problems or save me from having to do things on my own. And, that wasn't happening. And I thought, while I had friendships before, I'll be honest, it was a lot of focused on men, right? And
Right.
and I think that switch happened for me is like, you've got to get, not that I ever gave up hope, which we can talk about. I did end up, finding someone, and I'm happily married, but and it did came at even a later age for me. But it was this realization that you need to be okay even if this never happens for you.
Mm.
Right. And I think that's so important. It's not about giving it up. It's just about knowing you will be okay. You are whole and you need a purposeful, happy life. So friendships became even more, they were always part of my life, but maybe on a little more surface level,
Yep.
until I realized, I have all these people that really that are so full of love and support, and am I nurturing those as much as I'm worrying about some dude and whether he's calling me or not, right? So
Yes.
I really, I think that, and I say this too, but it kind of came at the time I changed careers, because then I was also meeting like-minded people. I was, in my master's program getting my counseling degree, and I had a lot in common. We tended to be sort of birds of a feather flock together. So we tended to have a lot in common. When I got into my coaching world, I met people that shared values and shared wanting to look toward the positive in the future. Not that I definitely have friends that I've had for 30 years or more, but I think that the more you get aligned, period, right, in your life, your career, your life purpose, where you're hanging out, of course you're just going to meet people that are really a deeper sort of type of friendship.
Right. And that connection
Mhm.
is so much more long lasting. Um, and I always feel like for women, and maybe you can relate to, for me, I don't have any kids. And
I
when
don't either.
all
Yeah,
my friends, yeah,
I
so
know.
then
Okay.
you know how it can be where all of a sudden your friends have kids and things get on their
Mhm.
plate and that friendship kind of starts to fizzle out unless there is something else that holds it together really substantially.
I'm I'm so glad you said that. I don't mean to interrupt, but I have it's not that you can't have amazing friends that are, if you're single, that are married or have kids, but I just like to be realistic. It's just not going to be the same. First of all, as a single woman, I know that I felt more okay in this world and less alone because I had a pack of women that were in the same exact boat as me. And I do
Exactly.
think that's important. And I tell my single clients, as I'm sure you do too, I say it is one of the things that comes with being single, is that you'll probably need to keep putting energy and keep cultivating those friendships.
Hmm.
Whereas I know coupled people need them too, but let's be honest, you've got your built-in Friday night movie watcher. You've got your someone to go to dinner with. It's just different. So it's not about dumping all those other friends, but I do think having friends that are in your same stage of life is huge. And you have to, I worked at that. I did have friends. I had many friends who I thought were cool, smart, interesting, and they were also single. So I didn't feel so out of it, or, the weird one, the odd one
Oh,
out.
totally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or the one that was constantly trying to be set up by all her friends who have
Right.
boyfriends or husbands and all that. Like I went through that phase. It
Yeah.
was so annoying. And
Right.
I did cultivate a group of, single men and women where we were
Mm-hmm.
just friends and nothing would happen otherwise. But it was so much
Right.
more fun. And it would allow those moments of being like, we can all go out together. And then if we want to go to the friend that has their kid's fourth birthday party, we can, and we can leave too.
Right.
Because it's a whole different sort of
Yeah.
responsibility and freedoms that are different than others.
It
So
is. It just is. And it's nothing against the married friends or the friends with kids or whatever.
you started cultivating these
Mm-hmm.
friendships.
Mm-hmm.
What were you really looking for in those friendships?
Someone who's reliable and consistent is really important to me. Maybe other people can handle it. Maybe it's my stuff, but I like, so, if we're going to spend time together, or, we make a plan, too much flakiness, that's not going to work for me. That affects me. I care. And I put a lot into my friendships. I feel like I do invest a lot of time and energy. So that reciprocal level of that, is huge to me. So of course, then, we have to have a lot of, have a lot of fun together, a lot of laughter. I would say shared values. And yes, when I was in high school, I was on the like prissy girls dance team, and I went to prom with a guy who was wearing makeup, who was, a gay, like
Right.
I've always kind of had this eclectic group. So I wouldn't say they're cookie cutter, but what they have in common is, they're I call them safe friends. They're people I feel like I can be myself around. They're people I feel like that they do follow through. They are someone that, we rely on each other. We can count on each other. We're somebody who we can be imperfect or mess up, and it doesn't ruin the friendship. Um, and fun is one of my top values. So we got to have a lot of fun
That's
too.
fantastic. And like when you were thinking even about how diversified, like of how people are, it's so wonderful that you were able to show up authentically with those friendships. I think that's one thing that sometimes as we get older and try to cultivate adult friendships, that sometimes we put on a mask for a little bit because we don't want to be open and vulnerable, because if we are and this person ends up flaking us, we just wasted that like emotional part of ourselves. I know it's happened to
Right.
me. It sounds like it's probably happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever coached
Yeah.
women around that part of the friendship of like trying to open up and be vulnerable in order to gain that trust for a new friend?
I definitely, if we haven't already said this, right, want to very much normalize just in general, if you're feeling like, oh my God, I'm kind of embarrassed to say it, I don't have friends right now. I'm feeling a bit friendless, or I'm not where I'd like to be in that. I want to normalize that. So as you mentioned, Molly, you have many women that bring that up. I have men and women that bring that up to me. So I think it's sort of this little secret that people will talk about. I want to find a mate or whatever, but it's a little more vulnerable to say I need friends. Right. That's supposed to come easy. And so I think first thing is just, it doesn't necessarily come easy the older we get. I know, people would say that all the time. I was like, whatever, I don't believe that the older we get, the harder it is. But you're not in those situations, right? You're no longer at college, or maybe you don't work in an environment where everybody goes out for happy hour after work. So I think the first piece of vulnerability is literally realizing that you're going to have to probably work at it and put yourself out there. And that doesn't make you weird. And that doesn't mean something's wrong. And when I moved I live in California now, but I lived in Austin, Texas for quite some time. And when I first moved to Austin, I met a couple of women that I really liked, just people that I kind of sparked that kind of, oh, I'd like to be her friend. And they had lived there longer. So they already had an established friend group. They already had people they knew. And, I don't, thankfully, I guess I had done enough work on myself or something that I was willing to put myself out there a bit more. I knew I would probably need to invite them and reach out to them, not because they didn't like me necessarily, but just because I wasn't top of mind. They already had their little crew. I didn't. So I think stretching yourself a little bit there, if you're that's just, it's just a reality. You're not, people could really, really like you, but if they've kind of got an established routine, an established friend group. So that is, to me, one of the biggest things to first, just to get over thinking, it's a lot like dating, right? Oh, they didn't respond like I wanted, or they didn't, I'm out, I'm pulling out. It's like, if it's somebody you really think could be a good potential friend for you, maybe be willing to be a little more vulnerable, put your neck out there a little bit.
Oh yeah. I definitely can relate,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I mean, I mentioned this to you, Amanda, offline
Mm-hmm.
before recorded that, I moved to St. Louis 2 years or so ago, and I've been so heads down in my business that growing friends, like getting that friendship group here has been a little bit more difficult than reaching out and meeting other coaches online and other people that I can, just network and meet online for some
Mm-hmm.
reason. It's just fascinating. But like you said, it does take more effort. And personally, I forget, and I think all of us have been there too. Like even when someone's like judging us or thinks something happened, like they're not constantly thinking about that moment. So it's going to also be hard to keep that person that you're trying to make friends with top of mind, have you be top of mind with them when they already have that foundation of their routine, their
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle, everything already set. But that doesn't mean you can't put yourself a little bit more out there and reach out to, go get coffee in 2 weeks or whatnot.
Right.
So.
Right. And before you know it, when I think back to those women in Austin, I mean, a couple of them, they became good friends of mine, but it took a little more of me, I say, courting them, and that's what it felt like a little bit. They weren't, now again, it's not that you keep doing that if you're not getting anything back. That's then not somebody who, and again, to not take it personally, so much like dating, it is timing too. Maybe that they just don't have the energy or the bandwidth or the desire to expand their friend group. And that's okay. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you or something. Yeah, a lot like dating, compatibility is about, are you both looking for the same thing? Do you want a new friend? So I think it's important to know that too, that your friendship has its compatibility, its chemistry, its timing. Sounds a lot like something else, right? You're not just going to make friends with every person you meet. There's going to be a lot that are just like, oh, they're nice, but whatever it was, it just didn't take off. And
Right.
that's okay. That is part of the process, especially when we get older and we're not just looking for warm bodies to go out with and get cute and dressed up, and go to the bars or whatever it was, that now we're looking for somebody that we can sit and have a long coffee conversation with. Those aren't everybody.
Right. Exactly. Those friendships, like you mentioned, very situational, timing of their life. Like you said, college, going out, that's what a lot of us did. And so you morph into corporate world. And I kind of almost think friendships as that, like when you go into work, not every single coworker is your favorite.
Right.
Not every single person can do like no one can always present and be a speaker. Some people like to do the behind the scenes. And so that's the same thing with friendships. You end up working with people that may be having the same sort of values and those friendships. So like, I'm just thinking of ones I've had in the corporate setting. Those that ended up being either acquaintances or became really good friends because we either worked on something similar and we were able to pull that out to then meet each other in their personal lives and really cultivate friendships on other sort of topics and areas being really cool. So
yeah, but it took a little time, it took a little effort. And like you said, not everybody was a fit. It is not judgment. It's just, for whatever reason, I believe there's conversational friendship sort of chemistry, and sometimes it just doesn't click.
Oh yeah. And so when you think about when you were, especially now, like you said, you're in the trenches of doing it. What do you think is the biggest challenge to creating adult friendships?
Well, I am, just to be clear, I was telling Molly before this started airing, I moved to a new state as well, new state, new city, totally left my friendships that I'd worked so hard to create. And so while I have some great friendships, they're not geographically desirable right now. They are not where I live. And so, I mean, I've gone to the app, the Bumble friendship making app. I mean, after all my dating, I thought, seriously, I have to go online again. This is not my plan. But never would I have thought I would do that. I'll just tell you the truth. I told clients to do it, but I never thought I would do it. Right. And now I'm there, swiping right and left on friendship potentials. And I think the same things we're talking about runs true as far as, I have, let's say I've met a few people, the one that really seems to be taking off more, around my age, no children, married, but no children. She has the time, she has the energy. Her weekends look different than other people I've met who are great, but their weekends are at the soccer fields and the swim lessons and it's pretty eaten up. So finding that person that just is sort of in the same stage of life, I think is important. And then, same thing. I mean, I would joke. I was like, oh my God, it's like I'm going on a date again. I'd walk away kind of going, I mean, I think we both had a good time. I don't know. It was, oh my gosh, it was so reminiscent. And sometimes you kind of walked away going, I don't think good, but like, with the one particular friend that's sort of taking off, I also was willing to reach out and, ask, again, and so was she. And so, I mean, I think that vulnerability, because it's a kind of dance, you're at first, is important. And let's see, was there another part of the question, or?
I just think about like the biggest challenges, and I think
Oh, the
that's
challenges.
one
Yeah.
of them. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say time, even I find myself,
Yeah.
like, even though I'm really enjoying this gal that I met, she's out of town for a week for something, then I'm out of town for 5 days, and then, oh, my husband and I are going to go on this little trip, and then, so I mean, it can be several weeks sometimes where we can't. Is that ringing true to you
Oh,
too?
totally. Same situation where it's like, let's try to plan something. One of my friends that lives here, and we're trying to look at something for October, and it's just like, okay, let's try November, like
Right.
already. So, and
Yeah.
that was last week when it was still the end of September. So, it gets tough. And when you're an
Yeah.
adult, like sometimes what's interesting, like for example, my husband's an engineer, and so he travels quite a bit sometimes to do work. And so if I'm like, well, we have a date set up with, this other couple, he tries his hardest to work around it. But if he can't, he's like, I am so sorry. Like he feels horrible because he knows how long it took to even get that planned. So
Right, right. Or, in my case, I'm married to a man who his downtime, his idea of a good time is not to go meet strangers and talk to them. He wants to chill out and be quiet. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need this interaction.
yeah,
Uh, and so I think you are, depending on where you are, single, couple, if you're coupled, then you are having to sort of think about this other person, right? And what they're going to be up for, what the schedule is. But the time thing, but I'll just give an example, since I'm in the trenches really working on this right now. So this woman that I've mentioned several times that I've met on Bumble, we've hung out now 3 or 4 times, and she's traveling right now, and so am I. But I shot her a text the other day. I was like, let's not wait till November until I reach out to her again. Like, that's what friends do, right? Hey, how are your travels going? How's the weather there? Whatever, right? And so I think trying to put that intention behind it, even if you are busy. And you know, I'm not a spring chicken. It's also like the challenge is time and just tiredness, like general energy level, right? It
right.
gets to be the end of the week. And this is what I say about the friendship thing for me. Connection is one of, I've identified through coaching, what's my top 3 values, and connection and fun. I've already mentioned 2. But connection is really important to me. And I get it through what I do for a living or through my husband, but it's not the same as girlfriends, right?
Right.
And so I always say this, like, I can kind of push it aside for that week because I'm tired, or push it aside for another week, push it aside. And then you look up though, and 6 months have gone by and you haven't made a friend. And then you look up in a year, it's the cumulative impact for me. Right. So if you're sitting there kind of going, yeah, I'm just too tired. I get it. You just kind of keep kicking that can down the road because maybe you're not miserable, like, lonely, but are you when you look up and realize really you don't have that? And the only way it's going to get there is if you do put in some energy and some time towards it.
Yeah. You just made me realize how much, like, so I have a friend from back home in Omaha, Nebraska. And so she and I started this communication effort via text, where we would video until our iPhone was like, we're full of storage. We would video chat each other every day. And that got to be
That's
a
awesome.
habit that we started in, let's see, May. And we do
That's
it now
awesome.
all the time. And I haven't physically seen her since May, but
Wow.
we talk, even like maybe through Voxer, doing
Uh-huh.
voice chat that way back and forth every
Mhm.
once in a while. And we know each other's busy, but then it's like, oh, I have this idea, or I have this thing I want to run by you, or like, does this dress look horrible? Like all these things that
Right.
you normally couldn't get
That's a
as
great
an adult right now as
idea.
a woman, but like maybe that'd be something
Right.
that you had when you lived in the college dorm and you had a friend, right? That you're
Right.
rooming.
or come over,
So
let me pick out my date outfit with me or whatever. That's
yeah,
awesome. I love that y'all have done that.
it's hard
And
to get there
yeah.
though, because it wasn't something we both really were thinking that we needed, but it
Mhm.
has really worked out really well. It's more or less to like developing the ones after you move, when you are cultivating new friendships in a certain location, seems to be
Mhm.
like, like you said, just having to be open and vulnerable and willing to put yourself out there.
And there's practical tips like, well, first of all, you can get on if you're somebody out there who's saying, okay, I really, yes, I have good friends, but I don't want to have to get on a plane to go see them or a video call. I want to eventually have, and I always say, all you need is one or two. Really, even just one, right? Like you don't need 15 new friends. You need one or two. So that's good news. But if you're sitting there and you're thinking, this is something I want, try the Bumble app. I've been amazed how many people are using it for the
Mm-hmm.
friendship and the awesome women that are on there. So people are on there. And you first, and if they're looking for friendship also,
Right.
right? You don't have to guess. If they're on that thing, they're also hungry for some friendship. So that's sort of a nice thing to know. Right. Whereas if you're in other environments, you kind of don't know, like, is it going to be weird if I say, do you want to go have lunch but I think that like I go to a really small fitness studio
Mm-hmm.
where it's not one of the big massive places, and so therefore I have gotten to know a few of the women there. Now we're not quite where we're hanging out outside of that yet, but I could see that happening because we're getting to know each other. We're talking about our dogs and our whatever, and so there are. And then I joined as a entrepreneur. I feel like we sort of are lucky in this way, in that there, at least in my area, there's a lot of women's entrepreneurial groups or
Yep.
women in business. I plugged into that. And again, all you need is one or two. You don't have to love everyone in the group. And you don't even have to keep going. Go there to find somebody that you can pick off, right? And make your friend. Meetup groups, I'll just be completely honest, there's not a lot in my area that I've
Mm-hmm.
looked but that's always something to look into. I think small, if you're into fitness, those smaller sort of boot camps or things that have a kind of a community built in, I think is a nice way as well. So there are tactical like places you can try to put yourself as well.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
with that 100%. There are a lot of different meetup groups here
Good.
for me, but at the same time, not all of them are ones that I want to join. But that also reminds me too, when you start to get into these groups, you have to remind yourself of the challenge of time. And I feel like one of the ladies that I have coached recently, she was talking about how, her husband loves to travel and they put all these trips on the calendar, and next thing you know, there's no room for friends, even though she made like maybe a handful of new friends. And she's like, well, when am I going to see so and so? Because now we have this trip planned, and basically you have your whole summer. She basically had her whole summer planned. So
Right.
it didn't make any room for it. So it's also kind of, if you are married or in a committed relationship, is having that conversation, being like, I love you and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I want friends. So we need
Right.
to make space for that.
Right.
So
Absolutely. Yeah. My husband knows that it is crucial to my well-being, and he knows he can't be everything that I need when it comes to the connection piece. But so because of just who he is, a major introvert and the way he likes to recharge, that means I will go do a lot without him. And
mhm.
he'll probably honestly love having total control of the remote and getting to chill out and not having to engage. But
That's awesome.
yeah, having that honest conversation, and yeah, it's, if it's something you want, you got to make time for it, just like you would if you want to exercise or you want to, build your business or whatever. It doesn't just come, sit next to you and happen for you. You do have to
Yeah, it's not like
make
we're in
time.
second grade again and we're actually
Yeah,
alphabetized and how we sit, and that's how we became our best friend,
that's
because they had the
right.
last, you know.
That's right, Molly. That's great. That's right. That's right. Unfortunately not. No.
Oh my gosh. Now I have another question with,
Mhm.
when we make friends and we have those issues of like what some of our challenges are, what do you think are ways that we self-sabotage ourselves in making new friendships or even like keeping long-term friends as adults?
Well, I know, what I hear sometimes from my clients with either newer friends or either those long-term ones is maybe something starting to bother them or rub them the wrong way about the friendship. And they want to just burn it down. They want to just be done with it instead of having maybe an awkward, uncomfortable, honest conversation about something. Right? We get our feelings hurt, or we're thinking somebody's not as invested anymore, or whatever it may be. And I get it. Again, we're so used to talking about having honest, vulnerable, weird, uncomfortable conversations with dating and partnership. But I was telling a client the other day, she was talking about, a friendship that's been in her life for over 20 years. And I said, just like a romantic relationship for 20 years, it might require some tweaking, some uncomfortable conversations, but we're just so used to thinking friendships are supposed to always be 10 out of 10. They're always the same person, they're always a tune. And listen, it's hard. I get it. It's awkward and it's hard. But I think if we can start to normalize that, again, good friendships, safe friendships, you can say, I'm really feeling kind of off, or this kind of hurt my feelings. And talk it through. So I think sometimes we self-sabotage by boom, friendships are supposed to always be easy, always be perfect, and so I'm out, or that's somebody I don't want to be friends with anymore. That's really the main one I see, is not being able to be in that middle kind of gray area of exploring, is there a way to make this better? Just deciding it's not going to, not going to be a fit.
Yeah, that I've seen that. I've done that in the past.
Yeah,
so I completely know what you're talking about.
Me too. Yeah. I think it's pretty normal and natural out there. Ask a lot of people like, oh, how's so-and-so doing? And they're like, well, we kind of just had this thing and we just sort of quit talking. And, they never really, it probably could have been saved, right? Or something. But again, I just think it hasn't been normalized that we do that with maybe our boyfriends, our girlfriends, or but hey, what's up? I didn't, that hurt my feelings, or I didn't like that, but we don't do that with our friends. And I think we can. I think we need to give them a little more credit that they have that resilience.
Yeah. And then like what I do too, or have seen actually, even like when people have shut off or pushed the friendship away hypothetically because of time, and then they rekindle the friendship, it's just like old things, and there's that reminiscent, and they're very happy, and then the same problem shows up again. And then it's just like this, almost like a wave pattern where their friendship goes up and down so often that they're finally just comfortable with settling and letting it sit as is. And I like how you brought up like perfectionism, that there's, hypothetically relationships are supposed to be easy, which means that they're perfect. But not every nothing is ever perfect. So you always have to put work in for those.
And again, when I have a client who's sort of, struggling with a friendship, we talk about, is this the kind of friend that you want to work toward keeping? Or has it always been a friendship that didn't really, if you think about it, has it always felt unbalanced or not really like it was good for you, and you felt like you had to be on eggshells? Well, then that's maybe you just getting hope to a healthier place where you don't want that in your life. But I go back to the word safe, if it really feels like a safe friend, somebody that's really been good to you and for you, and somebody that there's enough there, I think we got to have some grace. I've had friends that have gone through difficult times, maybe newly divorced, whatever it is, and they're the way they're handling it causes a bit of a schism between us, and just trying to kind of think, well, I value this person enough that I can kind of be grace filled there and see if it evens out. And not take it personally. So much of what we do, right? So much of our suffering comes from taking it personally.
Exactly. Especially like when someone's going through something as big as getting a divorce. Yeah, the behavior definitely changes. Speaking from my personal experience.
Right. And everybody handles it differently. but some people go crazy and wild. Some people, retreat and don't want to talk, but to really realize that doesn't mean they don't love you and care about you. It's just sometimes there's a season where they're just not able to be a very present friend for you. And what I'd also say to that, I could talk so much about, I've had that. I mean, I've been hurt by friends. I've been in that situation where I felt neglected, or, that they were no longer at the level of friendship that I wanted. And I had to then think, well, what's in my control? Well, maybe I need to not look to that person for that as much anymore. They're not able to be my number one phone call or the always available. So where maybe else can I get that?
Right.
Instead of just being angry and resentful and upset that's not what they can be for you anymore.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I think that a lot of people listening could relate to that for sure.
Yeah, I've probably done it without even knowing. Maybe I've been on the other end, but I know I've had times where I had my feelings really hurt because, I felt like, the dynamic changed and I didn't feel as important or prioritized. And there's a tendency to want to be like, that hurts, so we're done, like never, that person's not my friend anymore. And it's, well, maybe they just can't be what they've been. And you kind of need to accept a little bit of that and not look for that in that person for a while.
Yeah. They have their own growing to do too. So everybody does.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask my audience, I asked my audience on Instagram about, what questions do they have about adult friendships, making them, keeping them, everything. And so I have 3 unique questions to ask you. And one of the questions, I'm going to be honest, and might be this first one, is very relatable to what you might have said as self-sabotage, but we can discuss that again if needed. So she asked, after 36 years, I realized I'm in a one-sided relationship with my best friend. Every time we get together, I think it will be different, yet it isn't, and I get disappointed. I put a lot into the relationship, but for my best friend, it seems like it's a friendship based off of convenience. What can I do, and why am I stuck in this pattern?
Yes, I've kind of covered a bit, but to answer this directly, I first would get really honest about, has this always been the dynamic, and you because of who you were, whoever this person is that asked the question, because of who you were at the time, you allowed it, and you fed into that dynamic where you were always just the helper, you were always the one listening, and you didn't really advocate for that time for you to talk and for you to share. Or has something changed? To me, that's important. It could be that this follower of yours has changed, right? And she now wants a different kind of friendship. So then you it's always looking here and saying, have I changed? Is what I want changed? Or so I think that would be important for me to know. And then again, if it's somebody you think is truly, the friendship is rooted in really a deep connection, and there's then maybe it is worth that awkward, hard conversation. The other option would be, I find this when I was dating, I always would say this: they never asked me anything about me. They never asked me anything about me. Did you ever?
Oh, yes. Very much so. I was like, oh, we're done after dinner's over.
Yeah, it was always, and I listen, I think that was true. Like, some men just were not good at that. I also think I asked them so much about them. I put the spotlight on them because I'm good at that. And I didn't always take the initiative to just talk about myself, or, it's a nuanced thing. I mean, I get it. They should ask some questions, but, I was with a friend recently who is just right now at a time where I do feel like a lot of it's about her. And, the dinner was going on, and I was thinking, I haven't shared some of the exciting things that I've, got going on. So I just, in a lull, I just said, well, I'm really excited about what I have going on. I've got and then she had great response, but I had to sort of insert myself there. So I would tell this person, you've got to first look at, like, do you really think this person's selfish? I mean, if you really do, and you have, then maybe it's just not going to be your best friend anymore. We do outgrow friendships.
Yeah,
we do. And I was before I got on this call with you, I was thinking, I've always heard every 7 years. Have you heard that, Molly? That every 7 years we sort of change our friend group, or anyway, I've always kind of heard that anecdotally.
It's funny that you say that, but I would say mine is definitely between 5 and 7. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
it is. And I sort of just poked around real quickly, and there are some studies, that point to that. But I guess whether it's 7 years, 5 years, whatever, it is normal to change and to have some people kind of fall off and new ones come on. So sometimes we are really there more because of history than connection, than real connection. And that doesn't mean you have to like have a big breakup. It just means that you need to go get your needs met. And maybe you need to start investing your time in different friends or making new friends, if that's important to you.
Yeah. I love how you gave all those options, and I cannot wait for her to listen to this episode. Fantastic. Okay. The next one. My partner and I have decided not to have children, which has caused some issues in our friendship circles. Okay. This might be very similar to what we've already discussed. For him, it's only scheduling issues, when to meet up with his friends. But for me, it's different. I'm rarely invited to things because all my friends' lives are focused around their children, their kids' sports, birthday parties, family get-togethers. When we do get together, that's all I hear about is the kids, and I never hear anything about her. What can I do to get my friend back so we can enjoy time together?
Man,
Tough one.
This one I get, right? You'd probably do too, Molly, is not having the kiddos. No, first of all, I do have some friends who have kids, and like they hardly ever mention their kids. I mean, whether that's good or bad, like it's fun because we don't talk about, I mean, again, I'm willing to hear a few updates, but that's not why I'm, hanging out, right? I want to hear about the person. So they do exist. And then there are some people who their identity becomes their children. There's two different types of parents out there, moms, but parents out there. So I guess I'd say the awkward conversation is an option. It sounds like she really likes this friend. What can I do to keep this friend? It sounds like she really wants to keep this friend. So the like, I love hearing about your kids, but what's going on with you? And truth is, she may not know, and she may have gotten a bit lost. And what a cool friend you could be to maybe help her have some identity outside of her kids. Now, she may or may not want to, but you may be the only person that says, but I'm curious about you, or what do you think? What are you happy? What are you interested in? Is this even just the honest conversation? Like, are you happy? Some moms feel like they have to sound like it's the best thing that's ever happened to them and not admit that it is, but it's also really hard, right? So there's the calling out the elephant in the room, however you want to call it out, right? That there's that option. And then I would tell this lovely person, also put some energy toward making some friends that are in the same stage of life.
Yeah, totally. You've already covered that for sure in the beginning. And I could definitely see that for this person. And it's so sweet that they asked, like, what can I do to get my friend back?
I know, it makes me,
wonderful to pull that out of her. And I like how you said that too, that the thing that sometimes we don't even notice is how much our identity can get wrapped into things. And especially as adults getting wrapped into other people, our identity. So that was a great call out, to be honest.
Yeah, I know I have clients who don't really know who they are outside of their children. And some may want to face that and some may not, but I think it's a really cool gift and then I would also say, plan again, sort of location and where you are and setting makes a difference. So could you go away for a night? Because you're probably going to get a different version than at lunch with the kids playing at the playscape, at a children-friendly restaurant. That's probably going to be a different version of your friend than if you could go spend a night somewhere and she could truly feel more freedom.
Yep, I totally agree. Okay, number 3. This one definitely is you and me right now.
Okay.
I moved across the country. Well, the beginning is I moved across the country 2 years ago for a man I was dating. So we moved and found a job. We settled down, got engaged, but eventually broke it off. because I spent most of my time working and with him, I don't have very many friends. How do I make friends when living in some new environment? I feel like you did cover this so well with the
Yeah.
Bumble and whatnot. Is there anything else that you
Yeah.
think we need to add to this one?
No, girl, I would just say be brave, and I know it's not easy. I always, when my clients that are single in a new city, what do? They immediately start dating. Well, for a variety of reasons, but somewhat because it's very normalized to get on a dating app and go on dates. That's normalized. Like, of course you're going to do that, and you can be new to town, and that fills your time and gets you to meet people. And so it's a more awkward dance. It's a more awkward sort of putting yourself out there to make friends. Bumble app was an awkward move for me. I did not, but that you'll be surprised you're not alone.
Yeah.
And how many people are in that same boat. So I think it's truly kind of more of a mindset thing of getting over that's weird or awkward or somehow. How would you have friends there? How
Mm,
would you no, of course you don't. It's not because you've done anything wrong or there's anything wrong with you. It's just sort of circumstantial.
right.
And uh but it is up to you to fix to get what you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. Can you please tell the ladies where they can find you, learn more about you?
Yeah.
And I know that you have, like you said, speaking and
Yeah.
coaching available too, if you want to share any of that information as well.
Sure. Of course. Thank you. Thanks, Molly. So, a couple of ways that you could stay in touch. I have on Instagram, you can find me at Girl Get Your Roots Done. And I have to sort of explain that. Yes, it's sort of a play on a woman who, spends way too much time and money with her hair, but it's about getting your roots done, being grounded, what grounds you, what you're rooted in as a woman. So it's a site where I share, different advice, all of it sort of centering around how you can become confident, whether it's in finding friendships, your career, how you're finding your partner. And then my website is amandamcpherson.net. And through that, you can look into coaching services, speaking, trainings, different opportunities I have there.
Fantastic. And ladies, I will be, like always, including that in the show notes so it's easy to find her. So thank you once again joining me here to talk about friendships, because we could discuss once again, it's very difficult to do as adults, and it's very tricky sometimes for women especially. So thank you so much for being here.
It was my pleasure. Thank you. Hope it was helpful. Thank you.
Isn't Amanda wonderful? What I loved most was her honesty, like sharing that she too is in this friendship building stage now that she has moved to a new state. Sometimes I think that we forget how effortless it really was to, make friends when we were in school, whether that was third grade or, freshman year of college. When we're surrounded by people who were going through a similar transition or a similar life stage, it just makes sense why we would become friends. Once we're out and about working, our social group, our dynamics, they just change. There's people who are older or younger in their own life transitions. There's people with different values and goals as you. So it makes navigating, cultivating, and nurturing friendships more of a process where we have to be vulnerable, open, and trust ourselves through those ups and downs, just like dating. Now, I'm curious, what practical tip are you going to try that Amanda shared? I want to know. You can find me on Instagram and either leave a comment on the reel that I have with Amanda, or you could just send me a DM. If you do, I'll tell you what steps I'm taking to cultivate friendships as well. All right, lady, enjoy your day, and I will chat again with you soon.